What is the cheapest and easiest way to start growing mushrooms? The answer is the Easy Bake Barrel. The Easy Bake Barrel was developed by Christopher Swinson out of Mycophile Garden in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Check him out at mycophile.org. He has a commercial mushroom growing operation where he processes over 2 tons of mushroom substrate every month using nothing but Easy Bake Barrels. I'm going to argue that the Easy Bake Barrel is the best solution not only for the new mushroom grower, but also for a large-scale mushroom commercial operation. So follow along. I'm going to show you how to build an Easy Bake Barrel. Watch, and hey, if you guys wouldn't mind, like and subscribe. Before we get started with the build video, I want to talk about the Mossback Syndicate Discord channel. The Mossback Syndicate Discord channel is where we came up with the name of the Easy Bake Barrel. Actually, it was Big John from Dragonfly Farms out of Seebeck, Maine, who created the name. So big shout out to Big John and his mom. And if you guys want to join the Mossback Syndicate Discord channel, there's a number of us that have already built these Easy Bake Barrels. We're using them in our operations every single day. So if you have any questions, join the syndicate. And you can get access to special privileges through the Mossy Creek Mushrooms Patreon account. I want to plug them. I'm not affiliated with Mossy Creek Mushrooms. They're just friends of mine. I want to support them, and I hope you would support them too, because they built this amazing community. So join us at the Mossy Creek Mushrooms Patreon page. Get to the Mossback Syndicate Discord channel. Here's a disclaimer. I am in no way an electrician or an engineer, and this is not a correct way to do anything. So if you do anything with this Easy Bake Barrel, take responsibility yourself. I will in no way be responsible for any damage or fires that you cause or anybody getting hurt. But you can purchase this 1,000 watt element off of Amazon for about $25.99. Other options include some people using a 4,500 watt element, but they wire, when it's wired in a 120 volt circuit, it comes out to be about 1,100 watts. So you can still run it on a 15 amp breaker. You can pick those up at Home Depot. That's where this is from, for $9.45. So this is a beefier element for cheaper than Amazon. You will also need some cable. You can pick this up from Home Depot or Lowe's. They have a whole section there that have cables and wires, and it is a 3 conductor 12 gauge wire is what I'm using for this one. You can, I think 14 gauge is fine, but I'm going to go with 12 gauge just because it's a little bit beefier. If you really want to be safe, you can do 10 gauge. First, we need to find the location that we're going to install the element. Keep in mind that the base, the bottom of the barrel, is slightly above the bottom ring of the barrel. So you have to install the element and make sure that the element can clear the base. If you need to overshoot it, that's probably okay, but keep in mind that your water levels will affect that. I try to put mine as absolutely close to that base as I can, while still being allowed to have clearance for the nut on the internal of the barrel. So just a couple inches up, and that'll be a good place. Go ahead and mark it. And I'm going to use this stepper bit. I bought off of Amazon. They're pretty cheap. And whenever you start drilling, you might want to start with a smaller stepper bit, or even a drill bit to drill a pilot hole. And that's what I'm doing here. And now I'm going to use this larger stepper bit that comes in the kit that I bought off of Amazon. Again, it's linked in the description here. You don't want to go all the way through. I believe that it is the second to the last step on the stepper bit. For this particular element, you might have a different element, so you might need to size it up a little bit. Just try not to overshoot it. Drill it, test it, check it, drill it, test it, check it. So this is me checking it. It's obviously not big enough, so I'm going to have to drill some more. And I'm just going to keep going with this stepper bit until I reach that level that I marked on the drill bit, and try not to go too far. You don't want to go through it. You could probably easily do that. Now that I think that I've got it close enough, let's test it. Still not quite, so we need to go a little bit more. I didn't quite make it to that last step. And ultimately just sizing it up and checking it. I was right. It was the second to last step in that stepper bit. And if you install it now, it works perfectly. Now, I'm actually coming in through the back and I'm deburring it. I'm not actually trying to increase the size of the hole. I'm just trying to remove the burrs from the back of it, so that way that the nut will seal on there and make it kind of flush and flat. So it's a perfect size. It's a perfect fit. So now it's a perfect fit. I'm going to install the lock washer, but before I do, I'm going to add a small bead of this RTV silicone around it. Again, here's the lock washer, and the lock washer should go over the element and onto the inside of the barrel. I'm going to use the same approach when installing the ground wire, the ground nut. I actually want to make this higher than the element in hopes that it'll be above the water line and reduce chances of leaking. And then I'm using a stepper bit, and I'm going to do the same approach where I'm just going to drill a little bit, measure it, make sure the nut fits. And this is just any nut. This is a nut that I had laying around, a nut and a bolt that I had laying around. And again, I'm going to come in from behind, just kind of run it a little bit without trying to push through, and I'm going to deburr the metal shavings from the back. And whenever you have a perfect fit on the lock washer, I'm also going to put a dab of RTV on the head of the bolt, and I'm going to feed the head of the bolt through the barrel. But before I do that, I really want to make sure that I sand down the surface of the barrel. You want to have good contact with your ground wire and the barrel. So I'm just going to hit it with this wire brush real quick. You can use sandpaper or anything like that. Just remove the paint from the surface, about the size of the diameter of the bolt or the nut that you're going to use to attach your ground wire to. I think it's important to ground it to the barrel. Some people use one of those hot pot connectors, and those work pretty well. So here I'm wiping off the excess RTV. I did put RTV on the back of the bolt, which should be fine, but you don't really want any of the RTV to be in contact with the metal because you want it right up there. I'm going to install a nut to hold it in place until the RTV starts to cure a little bit, and then I'm going to try to remove that nut later, install the ground wire so the ground wire is flush up against the metal of the barrel. Again, it takes, so the RTV instructions are that you put the RTV on, you wait a half an hour, and then you give it another quarter turn. It starts to cure. So now we need to wire up our element. We're going to use that wire that I purchased from the big box store. I'm using a pair of wire strippers. I'm going to cut out the outer insulation. And then after the outer insulation, it exposes the 3 conductor wires and some paper. I'm going to go ahead and cut the paper away. Now I know what gauge wire this is because I bought it from the store, but if you don't know, you can size up the gauge of the wire using these particular types of snippers. They actually have the gauge rating on them. You only want to strip away about 1/4 inch of the wire. I think in this case, in that example, I actually cut a little bit too long. And we're going to prepare our plug. So we're going to do the plug in first. Take off the back part of the plug, which is like a strain relief. It's just 2 screws. You unscrew those and the strain relief comes on. And make sure you put the base on the cable. If it's already attached, you're going to be in bad shape. The easiest one to connect to is the ground wire. You want to connect the green wire to the green lug. And then you want to connect the white wire to the silver lug. And then you want to connect the black wire to the bronze colored screw. So here I am. I'm finding the white or the silver. We're going to connect the white to the silver, so that's pretty easy to remember. And then they say black to gold, but I think it's easy to remember if you think black to bronze. It kind of sounds the same, so it's a good mnemonic to use to remember that black goes to bronze. And we're wiring this up for 120. So we've got a hot wire and a neutral. You can actually connect a 220 volt or 240 volt element using the same technique and wiring it exactly the same way. And you can run a 220 element off of 110 power, and it'll be like 1/4 of the wattage. I actually kind of recommend that in some situations. The higher amperage, the higher rated elements seem like they're a little bit beefier, and they're actually cheaper. You can buy them at the big box store at Home Depot or something like that for under $10, compared to this 1,000 watt element that's linked in the description. It's $25 or something on Amazon. So I'm not an electrician, so I'm not going to take any responsibility for anything that you guys do related to this video. This is, you know, my, information only. I don't want to be liable. I am not liable. I'm not an electrician. I'm not an engineer. And now I'm just kind of screwing down the two pieces of the connector together. And I think it comes with instructions, so you guys can read the instructions on how to put that connector on. And you want to make sure that that strain relief is over the outer jacket of the insulation. So I'm just going to kind of give it a slight little twist and a push in there. Make sure that that's nice and secure inside that connector before I put the strain reliefs on. And these are installing the strain reliefs that we took off earlier. Just line up the screw holes and kind of push them in a little bit. It's easier to push and give them a little pressure while you're trying to screw them in. It kind of seems like it gets them started a little bit easier. Just kind of snug them up a little bit and then go back and give them a good nice push. Give everything a tug. Make sure everything's good there. Now we need to do the element end of the wire. So again, I'm gonna strip the outer sheath of the insulation, pull that off. Try not to cut into the insulation of the individual conductors of the wires themselves. Just only get through the outside. It's probably better to cut less and kind of tear it a little bit as it pulls off. And then, cut off our paper. And we're going to use some terminal connectors. You can buy an entire kit off of Amazon for really cheap, and it's always good to have around your house anyway. So I recommend you guys just buy a whole set of these terminal connectors. The terminal connectors work really well with this particular type of wire stripper that I have on the barrel there. I'm also making my ground wire longer than my other two connectors because I want that wire to stretch up to that ground wire, that ground lug that we installed previously. So it needs to be a little bit longer. Again, when stripping them, only strip off about a 1/4 inch. You can see in this video I stripped off way too much. I'll have to go back and cut that off later. And here's those terminal lugs that I'm talking about. They're just crimp-on terminal lugs. You feed them on, and it's kind of, you need to squeeze pretty well. If you got to put a good set of strippers, and these are okay, these strippers are okay. They have built-in terminal lug crimps on them, on the inside of the handle. Not the front part, but the back half, like right behind where the hinge is. And it has the gauge ratings on them. So you can read and say, okay, this is a 12 gauge wire. This is where I need to crimp it at. Give it 2 good crimps and then give it a tug and make sure that, tug on it and see if it comes off, Make sure that those are on there really well. If it comes off, you might need to throw it away and get a new terminal and try to crimp it again. It's a little bit more intuitive whenever you actually do it. So it's hard to explain, but just kind of crimp them on there. Make sure that there's a good metal-to-metal contact. But also make sure that the insulation is within the terminal connector. You don't want any exposed wire out of the back. I need to cut off a little bit of the copper off of this wire. It's a little too long. And you can tell whenever you put the terminal on there, the wire will stick out too far out of the front. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's fine for the ground wire, but the other wires, you don't necessarily want that to happen with. And again, I'm going to crimp it, make sure that my insulation is within the terminal, the back sleeve of the terminal there, and I don't have any exposed copper there. And the copper doesn't cover the holes of the wires. So we've got our 3 terminals connected, and now we need to wire them to the barrel. I'm going to start with the ground wire. I don't know if this is the best method or not to do this, and I put the ground wire high enough to where if it did leak, it was right around the water level that I would be operating at anyway. So I'm not too terribly concerned if this one leaks. You want about 6 inches of water in the bottom of this barrel. If it leaks to that level, I run outside, so it's not a big deal. You might be in a different situation where you want to run these in your garage or a different place. I wouldn't recommend running an easy bake barrel in your garage, but you might not want to have even the smallest leak. Um, and this barrel does not need to be airtight by any means. In fact, you don't want it airtight. You don't want pressure to build up. Now, when connecting the element, it just has two screws. You unscrew the screws, you put the terminal on there, and then you screw it back on. So it's a pretty simple process. It does not matter which wire goes to which connector. With the 120 volts, it's AC. It's going to work either direction. It doesn't matter where you put the hot or the neutral. After you get the screws on the lugs pretty snug, kind of position them to where you need them to be, and then give them a good, you know, one more additional screw and tighten it down. Um, this probably isn't the safest way to do this. It's, with these exposed terminals. And what I'm going to do later is go back and put some plastic or a sheath over the top of these to protect it. I suggest you do the same. You don't want anybody to bump into it, or even your cat or your dog to bump into that there's power applied to it, because there is a chance for injury if they walk into these exposed elements here. It's probably not a good idea, but I literally just covered those in that same RTV silicone. It worked pretty well for me before in the past. It also protects it from the weather, and stops them from moving around a little bit. So you can use plastic or any number of different ways to cover those exposed terminals. But however you do it, just make sure you're safe.